This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze Conversations with Eric Teplitz. And for all of you who may not have followed this particular part of Avoid the Maze, I just want you to know that Eric has his own podcast, which we'll also have in the show notes. And as a podcaster, sometimes it's difficult to listen to somebody else's podcast. I don't know if you've come across that, Eric, but I'm listening to yours and it's like, oh, why didn't I think of those questions for somebody? Oh, why didn't I do that? And the reason being is that I'm who I am and Eric's who he is. And so probably no two podcasts are really going to sound the same. But Eric has been writing blogs for quite a long time. And when you go to his website and you read some of his blogs, at least for me, it just makes me think that, I have those thoughts too. How can the two of us have those same types of thoughts? And we're totally different people. So I'm going to throw it to you, Eric. You are the coach. Tell us, first of all, what got you started writing the blogs?
Okay, what got me started writing the blogs? Actually, before I even go there, I wanted to comment because you had talked about podcasting, and I'm far less experienced at this than you, so I'm pretty new to this. I've just released my third episode last week, and I'm on a rhythm where I'm putting them out once every other week, and so it's a new endeavor for me, and I'm loving it. But I had some sort of thoughts in response to what you were saying about podcasting, and you said first of all that it was sometimes difficult for you as a podcaster. Now, granted, you also do quite a prolific output of podcasts, so right. I can see how you would be podcasted out at the end of a day. But I got into it in part because I really enjoy podcasts, especially the longer form, kind of deeper conversation podcasts. I love them. And so that's the first thing I wanted to comment on. But then also, you had talked about, oh, I wish I had thought of the questions that Eric is asking, that kind of thing. One of the things that I'm learning as I'm doing this is it's very easy to, and I'm sure this applies to many other things in life besides podcasting. That's why I'm bringing it up. Is it's very easy to judge yourself after the fact. So let's say you've done the interview, and you go, oh, lost opportunity. Why didn't I follow up with this question? Or why didn't I ask this? Or you judge in your own mind all of the flaws or missed opportunities, which it's very easy to do because it's impossible. You may have noticed, dear listener or watcher, it's really hard to be perfect in this life, isn't it? Right. And it's very easy to, in hindsight, see what you could have, should have, might have said or done. Right. And so I think part of the process of doing a podcast, and again, insert whatever other noun in place of podcast that might be, your particular endeavor, that you have to accept, I think, going in that, it's likely not going to be perfect, not going to go as smoothly perhaps as you want it to, or as you plan it to. That's part of the beauty of it, because I did an interview recently where honestly, we were deep into the interview, almost toward the end of it. And I said to the person that I was interviewing, I had a list of questions prepared, and I've pretty much scrapped it. Like, we haven't even gotten to most of these yet, because I was going with the flow of the conversation. And I don't apologize for that at all. And that felt like the right thing to do. But I'm realizing I have all these questions. And he was very accommodating and gracious, and allowed me to ask him some of the ones I had prepared. And I think that that's okay. Like, for instance, Tim Ferriss, who's a podcaster, very, very well known, one of the most popular and successful and long lasting podcasters out there. I love his show because he does really deep dives and deep conversations with a lot of people, and from all different kind of specialties and niches. And so it's very, very interesting. And he notoriously does a tremendous amount of prep and research for his shows.
Sure.
He'll sometimes even allude to the notes, printed out pages and pages of notes that he has, that he's, in the course of his research, and he keeps them on hand for easy reference. I am, by the way, going to answer your question about the blogs. I promise.
That's okay. No problem. I love this.
So the point being that he's done his homework, and he's really good at that. Like, he really thoroughly researches, and he has a team of people too that help him out. But, he really, really personally invests in getting to know as much about the person and their work as possible before he has them on his show. And whether or not he refers to the mound of papers at all during the course of the interview, sure, it almost doesn't matter, because that is the preparation that allows him to conduct the best interview he can. And by the way, there's always more research to do. You can never be complete.
Absolutely.
So you go in and it's like, all right, here we go. And, you trust that the work that you've done and the preparation you've done, the research you've done, will serve you and will serve the interview. And how much you actually draw upon those notes, how much you stick to the script that you may have, or the questions that you have. I mean, there has to be room for being present with your guest and listening to them and responding to what comes up and what they present. And it might be a completely different interview from the one you expected, and that's fine. That's fine. So I guess there's a certain, yes, you can prepare, and it's always good to do that, I think, but then eventually at some point you're leaping into the unknown, and it's sort of a leap of faith, and you're trusting that it'll go well enough. And here's another thing that I find very interesting about the creative process from the creator's point of view versus, let's say, the audience's point of view. This can refer to a piece of writing. It can refer to a film. It can refer to music, any art form that you can think of. As the creator, you know what you have not included. You know what's missing, or if you're a filmmaker, they used to have this expression, the cutting room floor, when films were made with actual film.
Right.
They would have to edit them by hand and literally cut the film in pieces to edit it. And there would be scraps on the floor for the stuff that didn't make the final cut. And sometimes a filmmaker, for any number of reasons, would have to leave on the cutting room floor bits that were precious to her or him.
Right.
And like, oh, but this scene was, they loved it. But for any number of reasons, maybe there was someone looking over their shoulder saying, hey, it can't be longer than 2 hours. Or maybe they just understood that every scene needs to serve the ultimate purpose of the film. And while an individual scene might have been, great independently in and of itself, it might not really fit into the film or move it forward or have a,
right.
So the point being is that as an audience member, usually anyway, you have no idea about any of that. All you know is the finished product that you're being exposed to and that you're enjoying. And to you, it's like, wow, how'd they do that? That's amazing. Now, they might be kicking themselves for all of the things that they feel they could have done, should have done, might have done, left out, didn't get to, didn't think of, errors that were left in, right? And it's a very different perspective. And I think that as a creator, it serves you to accept that as part of the process,
right?
And accept that you might not do a perfect job, but the audience that you're serving, or the people that are on the receiving end of your art, are going to appreciate it for what it is, hopefully. And you're going to be the most critical.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
and
anyway.
That's how I've been my whole life. So, why not do it be like that when I'm podcasting and going back and saying, wow, I like how Eric does that. Wow, why didn't I do it that way? But then, the best thing for me, though, is then I take that step back and I go, because that's Eric, I'm Karen, and I don't want to copy. But it's just like learning from each other.
Well, totally. And that's what I was going to say is that,
fun. Yeah.
there's this expression, right, that like good artists borrow from other artists, but great artists steal. And so you can do that, right? Like if you check out my podcast and you go, oh, that's such a cool idea, use it, take it. Yeah. Like, that you learn from, other people doing the same thing. And so, I can, and you might do this consciously, but you also might even do it unconsciously.
Right.
Just by taking in other content, it naturally sparks ideas and you realize, hey, I like the way they did this. I'm going to do something similar, or I'm going to steal that idea, or I'm going to incorporate that, or I'm going to ask that question in my next interview, so it's all good.
Absolutely. And well, I'm glad you shared that, because again, there are so many of us out there doing podcasts. And I think it's great that we can learn from each other, and also identify what our strong points are. So as you talk about preparing for a podcast, I have to admit to my audience that I prepare this much. I know who I'm going to be talking to. I know their basic background. I know the concept that we want to go with. But other than that, they are sitting in my living room and we're just having a conversation. And if it goes one direction, like you said, the audience, those of you listening, you didn't know that's not the direction that I was thinking of. It went that way because that's what my guest felt comfortable with. And I think that's, that's the way I want my podcast to go. So yeah, I'm learning a lot from you.
Well, I think that's a completely valid and, in a lot of ways, practical approach and a really helpful approach. It also obviously allows you to get a lot more interviews done than I'm doing by my method, right?
Exactly.
So it's, it's just everything's trade-offs. That's one of my sort of like mantras. Everything in life is trade-offs. And what, you have to understand and accept that. And the best thing you can do when you're making decisions is to do it with your eyes as open as possible. You can't foresee everything, but understand that, the trade-offs as best as you can determine them, and then make your decision knowing full well the downsides of what you're doing, or the things, and embracing the choice and saying, hey, look, I know that there are, downsides to the thing that I'm doing or the way I'm approaching it. And that's fine. Like I accept that and I'm going with it because it's interesting enough to me and it's promising enough of an opportunity to me and it's exciting enough to me. So it's worth it. And I think that's the best that we can do is, just decide and we have to make this decision for ourselves, by the way, because something that might be worth it to me might not be worth it to you, and vice versa.
Absolutely. So now going back to blogging, okay. So far it appears that your blogs, they don't necessarily correlate to your podcast, which is okay, because some of those blogs were written quite a long time ago. But what made you decide to blog, and where do you get those ideas from?
Yeah, I think that the idea for blogging came about, much like with podcasting, probably, in absorbing content from other people who were doing that I thought was pretty great. Like I thought, wow, I was a fan of some bloggers and their blogs and followed them and read them pretty like consistently and got a lot out of it. Found it, liked the content. See, like there's the medium and then there's the message, right? So blogging is one medium, podcasting is another medium. They're both great and they both have a lot of potential and they're different and they're similar.
Right, exactly.
But there's the medium versus the message. And sometimes you find a medium that works really well for you. And you might decide, I don't really like to sit down and write, but I love to talk to people. So maybe it's podcasting, or vice versa, right? Or both. So why did I start a blog? I think it was just, taking inspiration from other blogs that I myself benefited from and enjoyed and thought, this is a cool platform. New is a very relative term, right? I started blogging in 2010 which, there were people blogging as far back as that I'm aware of as 2004. So it wasn't new when I started.
Right.
But it's an amazing thing that we can do technologically, potentially reaching, an unlimited number of people. Potentially, it's a way to build a body of work and have it literally in the air and accessible from anywhere, just about, with internet reception, with internet service. And, it's, I liked the idea. In fact, the very, very first blog post that I wrote was pretty short. And I likened it to sending out cyber messages in bottles, and basically said, I'm just going to be putting these messages out there in the hopes that they reach someone and make a difference somehow to them for the better. And I knew that I wanted to have a generally inspirational theme to the posts, but I also, I have a lot of different interests, and I would be bored just writing about one topic, or speaking about one topic, or doing only one thing with my life. I like a lot of different things. I'm curious and interested in a lot of different things. And so, the subject of my blog was broad enough, basically inspired living. I called it Eric's Inspired Living Blog. And I liked the name because, inspired living is the theme, and almost, you can talk about, in terms of what does that mean, inspired living, you can talk about health, you can talk about diet, you can talk about exercise, you can talk about your dreams, you can talk about meaningful experiences, you can talk about people that have made a difference in your life. Right. I mean, like almost anything that I personally found inspiring and gave me juice was fair game to write about. So it gave me the flexibility to cover almost any topic that I wanted. And, to have a positive, some kind of positive takeaway from it, something that someone on the receiving end might benefit from in some way. So that was the thought process. Oh, and the name Inspired Living, and also like Eric's Inspired Living Blog. I liked also that you could interpret that as it's a living thing. It's alive. It's a living blog. It will presumably, whether or not anyone actually reads it, it will outlast me. Like I will come and go, and the blog will keep on going. Right. So I liked the idea of it as a living thing, as not just like a static thing, but a living thing. So it was going to evolve and change and, and breathe in a way, and have the potential to, impact people. I mean, one of the things, my blog does not honestly get a lot of views. It's not a hugely popular blog. That's okay. I mean, I really take pride in the quality. I really make sure that I have a certain standard, that I have to like what I'm putting out there, and I have to believe in it. And that's why I post very erratically. Throughout the years I've been blogging, I've gone months and months sometimes without posting anything. And then sometimes there'll be a flurry of posts. I know that might not be the wisest approach from a business point of view or whatever. But that's the whole point, is that it's about inspiration. Right. And if I'm not inspired to share anything, I don't force it. And, I really only post if I feel like I have something worth sharing.
Well, so, it's interesting that you say that, because when I first started blogging, I would just get up every single morning, and before I did anything else, I sit down at the computer, and the first thought that came to my head is what I would write about. And I really enjoyed that for a very long time. But then one morning I remember sitting down at the computer, and my fingers weren't typing properly. My head was not coming up with the right words. And I really didn't think I was having a stroke, but that was sort of like, what's going on here? Why can't I do what I've been doing all these weeks, months? And then I realized as I sort of moved away from the computer, you're wiped out right now. Go back out and start living. And that's really when things started to change. And then once I went back to blogging, I'll still come in here in the morning and sit in front of the computer. And if thoughts don't start churning, forget about writing. Go on to something else or go back to bed if you want to. But I think it's important for those, who say, well, I have to be really artistic, very literate to blog. And my comment is no, it's your thoughts, your feelings. And, you don't have to share them with the rest of the world if you don't want to, but mine are out there like yours. And, every once in a while I'll get an email from somebody saying, why don't you talk about that on your show? And it's like, interesting. Or somebody else saying, I've been down that road before. Thank you for admitting you have. So not all of us are in this business, to be rich and famous. Although if somebody wants to make me rich and famous, I'd be fine with that.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I wish for my son to get a better job and he moved out of state. So, but today we're going to talk about one of your blogs. And so I sort of sent this to you a couple weeks ago and said, hey, Eric, I just read this blog. Let's talk. So, and it's about relationships, and, how we develop them and what relationships are all about. Depending on your culture, you can view relationships differently. And so many of us,
it's a very small topic.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I may have to cut them off, everybody, at some point. But how did you get into this one blog? Was there something that hit you and said, hey, I need to write about this?
So relationships obviously is a huge topic. And, people that present themselves as relationship experts or what have you, I kind of have to laugh because not that there aren't valid, helpful points of advice and thoughts and wisdom about relationships, because there's certainly a lot of that out there. But I think that there is an inherently mysterious aspect to relationships. There's always an element of mystery to any relationship. How and why did I meet this person at this particular time in my life? And what role do they serve in my life? And what if I had not connected with them? And how long will we maintain this connection? And I mean, it's endless, right? Relationships are essential. We are social creatures. We are social animals. And like it or not, we need other people. I don't care how independent you are or strive to be. You might live off the grid and grow your own food and do everything yourself. You're still ultimately going to be dependent in some way on other people. Right. If maybe just in terms of the inspiration from, let's say you are living by yourself out in the middle of nowhere and fending for yourself and doing everything for yourself. You don't live completely in a bubble, and maybe to pass the time, maybe something you do is you read. Well, guess what? Those books were written by other people in some way. I mean, right. We all need other people. So relationships are a huge topic, a fascinating one. For this particular article you're referring to, I was speaking towards a specific type of relationship, and that being like a long-term romantic relationship / life partner. And I guess, I have some credibility to speak about this in the sense that after many years of searching and much effort put forth, I eventually did meet the person that I ended up marrying, and we've been together. Well, I mean, we got married on the 7th anniversary of the day that we met, and we've been together another 9+ years since then. It'll be coming up on 10 years in November, married, and 17 since we first met.
Sure.
So, if you want to call that credibility, fine. Again, I don't claim to be any sort of, like guru or expert, but I certainly have learned things over the years from my own personal experiences. And I know that for me, finding a mate, like a life partner, a true, compatible, loving, genuine, mutually nourishing relationship with a partner that lasts was I always wanted that, really. I mean, I worked really hard to try to make it happen, or to try to do what I could to,
Sure.
and failed miserably time after time. And of course, it's not in any relationship. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I've quoted Billy Joel on your show before.
I love it.
And I'll quote him again. He has a song called "And So It Goes." It's a very melancholic and sad song about an awareness of a relationship that very well might end, that he's singing about. And there's a lyric in the song where he says, "So I will choose to be with you. That's if the choice were mine to make. But you can make decisions too. And you can have this heart to break." So no one person can sustain any relationship.
Absolutely.
It's any kind of relationship. It has to be a two-way street. And the thing is that we can never control the hearts and minds of other people. And we shouldn't. We can't, but we shouldn't.
Absolutely.
Anyway, and so entering into a relationship of any kind inherently involves risk, and inherently involves vulnerability, because you can get hurt. You can get hurt by the other person's, maybe lack of interest or potential rejection, or at any given point, without notice, they can be gone. And that could be by their own choice, or life can take them. I mean, it's understandable why we might be gun shy. And if we've experienced hurt from previous relationships, especially so, perhaps, we have wounds and psychological scars and emotional scars, and it might make us more careful or tentative about allowing ourselves to be that vulnerable again.
Sure. Absolutely.
What I noticed about myself that's kind of interesting is that I certainly went through my own share of heartache repeatedly throughout the years, over the years, with different relationships and different, or different people, maybe I was interested in the interest wasn't returned, or the relationship didn't last, or whatever. And, I would certainly take breaks I'd be like, all right, like, I'm going to take a break and be alone for a while, and that's fine. Like, I need, and I think that's good. Actually, I think it's really healthy. I think it's important to be able to be alone and to have a good relationship with yourself. It's really the foundation for any relationship that you're going to have with other people. If you don't have a good relationship with yourself, it's very, very precarious. Then, a good example of this is if you're not being honest with yourself, you really can't be honest with another person.
So true. So
true. Anyway, that's what was the question?
That's why I love having you on every month. Because, one of the things that I learned, and again, through making many mistakes in relationships, or even trying to develop a relationship, is that I didn't have a good relationship with myself until I met my current husband. And we've been together 38 years. And I say that in the fact that when I met him, he wasn't necessarily the person I was looking for, but there was a connection right away. And I knew more about myself, what I wanted. And even though the package didn't look like
Hmm.
the one in Tiffany's that, of course, I wanted to be able to afford to have. Deep down inside, I knew that big elaborate package in Tiffany's really wasn't meant for me. It was meant for my dreams.
Hmm.
Okay. Like a Hallmark movie, I guess I would put it. And because I knew myself, I was able then to be vulnerable with him almost from the get-go, which is something that most of us don't do. You know, we put on
Hmm.
our best face for a long time. And then all of a sudden, when we let go, sometimes that ruins the relationship. It's like, well, you were this sweet, wonderful young woman, and all of a sudden you're an ogre. And, where did that come from? But he knew who I was right from the beginning, and I knew who he was. And I know that's not always easy. Okay. And when I was looking at the blog, as I was reading it, it's like, that's where you have to start from. You have to start from wanting to have a relationship with yourself before you can have with somebody else.
Yeah. And what you said again to me speaks to the mystery of it all, right? Like you met this person, he wasn't who you thought you were looking for, and yet this connection was very evident, it sounds like, from the beginning. And that there's mystery to that, isn't there? And also what I find very interesting is that we have an idea in our heads about what we want. And
Right.
and I've done this exercise in the past where I I imagined my ideal mate and put on paper all of the qualities that person had, right? And what is so interesting is that you can do this exercise, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's good. It helps you tune into what matters to you and what you're looking for. And I think that's very good. It's good to be clear. And also it's good to be clear, especially about what's a non-negotiable for you. So like
Absolutely.
there might be some wiggle room in certain things, but certain things on that list are going to take higher priority than others, I'm sure.
Right.
So, and that's very personal, and it's not right or wrong. It's what is important to you, and you have to honor that. But you can actually meet someone that on paper is your ideal mate. They have literally every trait that you listed, and they can totally not be the right person for you. And that could be a really kind of disorienting experience if you've ever had it, where you go, on paper they're ideal, but something's missing. You might not even know what it is. You might not be able to pinpoint it, but you just know in your heart, nope, it's not it. So, yeah, it's the article, by the way, that we're talking about. I think the title was changed. It was published on another site. It was changed from my original title, but it's something along the lines of 7 lessons that may help you find a long-term or
right. Fulfilling.
Thank you. I knew there had to be, because a lasting relationship in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean it's a good one, right? Like people stay together forever, and it's a miserable situation, but for whatever reason they stay together. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't wish that on really anyone. Yeah, 7 lessons that may help you find a fulfilling long-term relationship.
Yeah.
Of course, it's may, because how can I guarantee that? I can't. But it speaks to kind of some of the key things that I learned along the way in my romantic relationship life, let's say. The things that I learned that I consider really pivotal and key lessons along the way to finally meeting Samantha, who is my wife now. And I do think, like, when I trace it back, I can see a progression. I can see, experience teaches you, and you gain hopefully some maturity and some wisdom and some self-understanding, greater self-understanding. But when I reflect back and I think about previous relationships, I do kind of see it as a journey and a progression. And especially the relationship that I was in prior to meeting my wife, it was an improvement upon all of the previous ones. It was a significant improvement. But it still was not what I really wanted. And that was, it's really interesting to reflect on that, because there was a point at which I kind of had to make a decision. You know, I could agree to just sort of embark on this relationship. She was interested, and like we could give it a go. And I just knew in my heart that it wasn't, while I admired her in a lot of ways, and we had some common interests, and like there were contexts in which we got along great and we were a match, but I knew that there were important things to me. And I don't even know if I could have like really honed in and specifically elucidated to you exactly what those were. I just knew they were missing. I could vaguely point to them. And it's no fault of this other person. She's who she is. I'm who I am. And I just recognized this is not going to satisfy me. And you're not doing anyone else a favor, by the way, by entering into a relationship for their sake. Like they really, you know, like don't do that. You know, you're not doing someone a favor. No one wants to be I think no one wants to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't really fully wholeheartedly want to be in a relationship with them. I'm talking about a long-term.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's whether it's in a romantic relationship, just a friendship, in a business, because we all do change. And as I heard you talking, what I find interesting is that when I met my husband, we were both, it was at a time where both of us were sort of looking for somebody. And I know that I wasn't exactly who he wanted. I mean, we almost voiced that on the first night that we met, like, you're not quite who I thought, you know, I would want to be sitting next to you tonight. And he said basically the same thing. But when we got married, I knew that I was in love with him. Okay. He knew he loved me. And he told me that before we got married. He said, I love you, but I can't right now say that I'm in love with you. And my heart sank when he said it. But when we talked about it, it was like, I get it. Okay. I really could understand it. He had, most of his friends were female friends. And it wasn't so much that he was in love with any of them, but those relationships were very important. And he was still trying to define, you know, who I was. And he said to me, I want to marry you, but I just have to tell you, I love you. I'm not in love with you. And I made the choice that that was okay. Didn't know if he ever would be able to say to me someday, I'm in love with you. But we were best friends. And that's how I knew it was right for me. Again, our listeners, you know, as they're hearing what you went through, what I went through, it doesn't mean it's right for you. That's something that deep in your heart, you have to know, you know, what you need, and can you supply some of what your partner needs? Because like you said, it is a two-way street, but there's also a give and take.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, it's like you talk about this in love versus loving someone versus being in love with someone. And it begs the question, let's define our terms. What do we mean? What does that mean? Right? It might mean something different to different people. From my personal perspective, I mean, being in love, what is that an indication of? If you think back on your life and your experiences and the times that you have believed that you were in love with someone, what did that mean? And what did that result in? These are just questions I can't say there's a universal answer to them. But sometimes we mistake the sort of like lustful infatuation or romanticized ideal about someone, or, you know, we equate being in love with these extreme emotions. And how reliable is that for when you're talking about a long-term commitment relationship.
Exactly.
You use the two words that I think are essential, which is best friends. I mean, like that's it, that's it. Like really like genuine it's a partnership. You have each other's best interest at heart. You genuinely love the person. You genuinely, care for the person. You generally want the best for them. You genuinely, like it's easy to give to them. You want to give to them. You want to, so, anyway, just to finish the what was for me an inflection point, a really significant one, was I kind of had a decision to make about a relationship. And at the time, it was a long distance relationship that I didn't expect to continue as long as it did. And I basically had the opportunity to like, okay, let's live together. Let's do this. And I knew it wasn't right. I knew that, and so I said, no, like, no. And I had to, part of me wondered, am I being unreasonable? Am I being foolish? And am I unreasonable? Why do I say that? Because without getting too into it, the specifics of it, we had lived apart we dated when we lived in the same town. She moved away. I assumed that was going to be the end of it. It was an amicable parting, and that was that. And it continued over time as a function of, I think we each were continued looking for a partner in our respective cities and weren't finding one in neither of us. And so like a holiday would come up, and we still stayed in touch because we did really like each other and we were friends. And so a holiday would come up and say, hey, are you doing anything over da 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 da? Do you want to go to da 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 da? Sure, let's go. And we would do this. And this went on for years, for years, right? And I was actively looking for a partner that I could build a life with, that I knew was a truly compatible partner. Wasn't finding it. And trust me, I put forth tremendous efforts to meet people and to, it just wasn't happening. And yet here was this person that was always there and always interested. And so how do you not look at that and say, wow, I mean, that's something, like that means something. Right. And it was, you could think of it as a test. Maybe, the universe was testing me. I don't know. But it was, in a way, it was a test because I had to listen to my heart and I didn't think it was fair to either of us, by the way. Again, because you wouldn't want to be with someone who wasn't fully and wholly interested in being with you.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
So I felt like, it's painful. It's not, no one likes that. No one likes to be rejected, whether you're whichever end of that you happen to be on, rejector or rejectee. I would argue rejectee is probably more painful, but it's not pleasant being the rejector either, especially if you care about the person, you really like the person. So I made this decision, and part of me thought, you are ridiculous. You are a ridiculous human being. Like, here's this woman who genuinely, clearly loves you and cares about you. And you do have certain, like things in common. And she's a genuinely good person. What the hell is wrong with you? Like, look, you're not able to find anything better, or quote better, like for you. But I just knew in my heart it wasn't right. And so I had to like say, no, I'm not going to, I didn't want to be in a relationship for the sake of being in a relationship. Sure. And I think this is a huge point, really important point, is you're better off, and you need to be okay with being by yourself, single, let's say. That is much better than being in a relationship that is not great. I mean, great. Yes. So it's hard for people. People don't like to be alone. People have more than ever. Honestly, it's very disturbing to me just walking down the street, and almost no one is without their phone. As they're walking, they're looking at their phone. Their ears are plugged up. They're looking at their phone. They're texting as they're crossing the street. And it's like, wow, you can't be with yourself for the length of time of a short walk. You don't want that. You don't want to disconnect. You don't want some time just to breathe and not have input coming in and or like being distracted. Like that's, to me, that's disturbing. Anyway, all this to say is that I'm of the opinion that it's far better to be single than in a relationship that you don't want to be in. To me, it's obvious. I understand. I get it. I understand. We have a need for companionship, and I get it. But anyway, I made that decision. I was like, no, I'm not going to proceed with this. And part of me wondered, was that it? Was that my last chance? And now I'm destined to, it sounds crazy or ridiculous, but you do have those feelings.
You wonder.
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, like, well, maybe that was it. And maybe that was the best I was going to find. And now, like, that's it. But I just knew in my heart it wasn't right. And honestly, it was, I think, 2 months from the time that we last saw each other that I then met Samantha, 2 months later.
And that was meant to be. And that's interesting.
Meant to be. I don't know about meant to be, but the timing is very interesting.
Right.
And it's an essential part of meeting people. If Samantha and I had met at a different time of our lives, and we've talked about this and speculated, like, would we have even been interested in each other, let alone available or whatever?
And that's what I say meant to be, because you were, both of you, obviously, of course, I don't know Samantha, but it's obvious that both of you at that time, you were open. Okay. Whereas if it had happened right afterwards, you probably would have been closed off. You may have seen Samantha and she's just another woman in the room.
On the trail. We met on a hiking trail.
Oh, okay. All right. But, I know for myself that I was brought up in a way that you have to have a man to survive. And, I can say this now because it's many years later, but my first husband and I think we truly fell in love because his parents expected him to find somebody and my parents expected me to find somebody, and we found each other. And we just sort of like, I think we role played for the 7+ years we were married. And now I can look back and say I'm very grateful for that relationship. Not only do we have a son together, but I can now look back and not be angry about what happened. Such a great learning experience. And when you talk about how much that can hurt when a relationship ends, yes. But if you can learn from it, you can be so much stronger in the end.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, I'm thinking again about that comment you made about being in love versus, he loves me, but not in love with me, whatever. I open up my article with an anecdote of a relationship I had when I was in my 20s. And the opening line of the piece, I'm pretty sure, is a quote from her, this woman I was dating, saying, "You're not in love with me. You're in love with the idea of being in love." Yep. That's the opening line of the article. That's what she said to me in my memory, verbatim. And, again, it speaks to this. What does it mean to be in love? What does that even mean? And that was a very interesting experience for sure, that relationship, for various reasons. I mean, we didn't meet in person until we had been really quite emotionally vulnerable with each other. We had been corresponding over the internet. This is even before like the internet dating sites, as far as I know. And we had this connection that was, I thought it was pure, right? Because it's a pure soul to soul connection. We've never even met in person. We've communicated over the internet, and we then spent many, many hours on the phone with each other. Got to know each other voice to voice, person to person, but without ever having seen each other. I mean, at one point we exchanged pictures, but this is back in the day where people didn't really have digital cameras. We mailed each other photos. And I remember she sent me, I think it was 3 different photos of herself, and she looked different in each one of them. Which, to take that for what it is, interpret that as you may. But the point being is that when we finally met in person, and I talk about this in the article, it was shocking because I felt like I knew this person on a deep level. We shared like really personal things with each other, and had an emotional connection already, and an intellectual, and both intellectual and emotional connection. And we had never actually seen each other face to face. And again, part of me, I still probably am a bit of a romantic and an idealist. So part of me thought this is so incredible, and like it's pure because we connected spirit to spirit before we ever,
Right.
But the experience that I had was she came out to see me. Again, this was a long distance relationship as well. And I'm hearing this voice that I'm so well acquainted with after logging, I don't even know how many hours together on the phone. Like, I feel like I know every nuance of this person's voice, speaking voice. And it was coming out of a physical person body that I had literally never laid eyes on before. And it was very strange.
I'm sure.
It was very strange. It was like cognitive dissonance. I know you, I don't know you at all. Like, it was very strange. And what I learned from that, among other things, was that a person's physicality is a part of who they are. It's, and it's not insignificant. So there you go. Take that for what it's worth. But anyway, I tell an anecdote about that relationship to open up the article, and then I proceed to specify 7 lessons that I learned on the way, en route, if you will, to meeting my now wife and longtime partner, and we're absolutely best friends. And we're not just together. We're not just like coupled, but we're happily coupled. We're not just together for a number of years. It's like very, very happily and gladly, and wouldn't want it any other way kind of thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, I'm going to put the blog link in for you, because I think it might be interesting for our listeners to read it. Again, one of the reasons I have asked Eric to do this monthly with me is that Avoid the Maze I created because I kept finding that I was doing the same thing over and over again, making the same mistakes. And I wasn't listening to other people. Not that I had to copycat what other people were doing, but I wasn't progressing. And I thought to myself, Karen, if you just sit back, maybe there's somebody else who has experienced what you're experiencing now. And I didn't want to ask my so-called girlfriends or my cousins, because I thought that would make me look like, there was something wrong with me. And so by doing Avoid the Maze, when people take us on their journeys, share different thoughts, it's like, oh, I've been there. And one example before we close today is that for anybody who reads my blogs or follows me on Facebook, I've been talking about the fact that my 31-year-old son, who's been working in the sports field, had 4 different offers for a job. He took one which got him to move out of state. So for 31 years, he's been part of this household. And on Sunday, as we helped him pack his car, actually, he took my car temporarily, but we packed up my car with his stuff and he drove off. I stood in the driveway and I thought my heart was being cut out. Yes, you want this for your children. My mother saw me drive off, okay, and I didn't think anything of it back then. So I know it's natural, but when I put it out on Facebook, I have to thank all those people who said, feel what you need to feel.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get through it. And I have one friend who said her son lives 2 hours away. And every time, not when she leaves his house, when she leaves his house, she's okay to come home.
Mm.
But when he comes up to visit
Mm,
and
mm,
he leaves,
mm.
she said her heart feels torn. And so it was like, okay, I can get through this. This is normal. This is something that people go through.
Yeah, it's part of that vulnerability we were talking about earlier. I mean, when you care for someone deeply, that comes with that sense of vulnerability. So, it's part of it. You can't separate it.
And it's another relationship. And
Yeah.
that's the other thing. That when you read this article, this blog, I read it in 2 different ways. The first time I read it as a relationship with my husband, but then the other day I read it after somebody said, yeah, Karen, you're allowed to feel these things. And as I went through here, it was like, that's okay. I can get through it. I'm not alone. And so I hope our listeners feel the same way.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
now we have to
interesting.
come up with another subject for next month.
I'm sure we'll think of something. I just want to say, first of all, again, thank you so much, Karen, for having me on. And you asked initially at the beginning, why did I write this, or why to start a blog? And then why did I write this post? And in part, and maybe it's why I write most of the things that I do, it's to share my experience and provide, an opportunity, first of all, for other people to take from it what they will. It might not even be like what I necessarily intended. They might be able to apply it to a different, slightly different context. But we're all on this journey. Like, yeah, we each have our separate individual journeys that are different, but we all have the common human journey that we experience. So it's natural that we will relate to other people's experiences and feelings. And I hope that the article, for those who really want a long-term relationship, and it's something that they maybe have been searching for a long time, and maybe are feeling discouraged, I hope it is there to provide some hope that you can, like, it is possible. And of course, there's no guarantees in life, but so that's part of my hope for the article, is that it helps people to maybe it offers some encouragement and hope, and maybe they can take something from it that's valuable, that will help them in some way. That's the hope.
Wonderful. Well, I hope everybody has a great day. I know it feels like summer in Northeast Ohio, so I don't feel as jealous talking to you today, Eric. So for the next couple months, I'm going to have warm weather and I'm going to enjoy it. Everyone have a great day, and check the show notes. There will be a lot of information about Eric in there. Have a great day. Bye-bye
Okay.
now.
Bye.